And an important concept to introduce here is the idea of linguistic paleontology. This is the idea that when we look at the diverse descendant languages that share a common proto-language, in some cases, we might find that there was a proto-form that could point to a possible origin for where these languages may have originated. So the Proto-Uto-Aztecan languages, the Uto-Aztecan languages include Nahuatl, Wixárika or Huichol, Nayari or Cora. Wixárika and Nayari are very closely related. And in fact, they are the ones that are closest to my own ancestral language. So I'm really happy to include that one in this example. Yaqui, To'ono-O'odham, Hopi, Paiute, and many other languages across Western United States and Western Mexico. These have many cognates for terms such as turtle, turkey, coyote, and so on. And the idea is that if we can find some area that shares, that could have all of these source terms, maybe we could hypothetically locate where this Proto-Uto-Aztecan language may have originated. Probably somewhere or between 5,000 and 4,000 years ago. For the longest time, we've assumed that it was somewhere in Northwest Mexico. And Jane Hill has been one of the pioneers for trying to look at the various descendant Uto-Aztecan languages, especially interested in maize agriculture and the technology used to cultivate and to prepare maize to eat. So words such as comal and milpa and sintli and so on. Sintli meaning maize ear or mature maize. So looking at these examples of maize technology and cultivation, food preparation, maybe there's a way to find a place where, maybe archaeology could also tell us about the origins of this kind of agricultural practice. So for the longest time, we've assumed that it was Northwest Mexico. But more recent research has argued that, well, maybe that it could have originated farther north. We're talking perhaps Utah or Colorado as an origin for the Proto-Uto-Aztecan. And then instead of a agricultural society that originated in Northwest Mexico and then spread that technology, carried that technology into the American Southwest and then going north into into Utah and into California and south into Mesoamerica. Maybe it originated in Utah and then everyone else went south. That's possible. I would need to look at more evidence to understand the logic behind this, but I'm open to this idea. But the premise is that these related ancestral or these related languages have common words for technologies and animals that were in their environment and had been in their environment from millennia ago. So this can, with these kinds of approaches, we could think about where this ancestral community may have originally lived and how they migrated from there, what directions they took, and what technologies they took with them as they were carrying and spreading out and taking their cultures and their languages along with them, which would evolve into their own lifeways. Another interesting example of this is the proto-Algonquian that may have originated somewhere between Lake Ontario and Lake Huron in what's now Southern Ontario. And I'm thinking about a seminal article by Siebert, who wrote this back in 1967 by looking at the descendant Algonquian languages such as Menominee and Ojibwe and Massachusetts and other related Algonquian languages that have related terms for creatures such as golden eagle, bison, raccoon, species of deer. And he did a very interesting reconstruction by looking at not only the diversification and the location of the Native American communities that spoke these different languages, but also the animal and plant species that are common to these languages. So look for a place that had a word for raccoon, or places that we still find today populations of raccoons, otters, seals, eagles, pine, bison, and so on. So looking at the migration patterns of these various animals, even though they inhabit different parts of North America, there's still this one area where all those biological maps overlap. And that is that region between Lake Huron and Lake Ontario in southern Ontario province. So that's a very interesting kind of, intersection of using biological, cultural, and linguistic data to, I think, convincingly reconstruct the origin of a proto-Algonquian language several millennia ago in that region, because that from there we can then explain the migrations, those nations that went west, such as the Ojibwe, those nations that went east, such as the Massachusetts, those that went north, such as the Cree, from that ancestral land in southern Ontario, which also nicely overlaps the different, or like a place where we find the habitats of all those different animal and plant species. So that's an example of the linguistic paleontology that has been applied to many other parts of the Americas, such as, again, the example of the Proto-Uto-Aztecan groups is somewhere in Western North America. So I'm going to come back to these examples to think about the movements of peoples and also the languages they take with them, and how the diversification of these groups as they disseminated and migrated outward into other areas. What other cultures, what other peoples did they encounter along the way? Were there exchanges of knowledge? And did this knowledge exchange also include exchanges of language? We have very important examples of this in Mesoamerica. For example, the ch, which is one of the most distinctive sounds in Nahuatl. It's even in the name Nahuatl. That was not original to the Uto-Aztecan languages. That came from the Totonac language, which was in kind of the eastern part of central Mexico, like toward in northern Puebla and central Veracruz. So thinking about the communication of culture, the meetings of peoples, the exchanges of culture, and also exchanges of grammar and language that we can consider by looking at how languages may have influenced each other, how languages may have been carried with migrations. These are going to be important questions that we're going to consider for the remainder of this part of the historical questions for part 3 of the 2025 Q&A for the Eye of the Serpent. So I will use these linguistic approaches especially to talk about and to elaborate on the remainder of the questions for this part of the Q&A session. So I look forward to continue to talk about languages, to address the rest of the questions as we explore more of these examples, more of these questions about the histories, the ancient histories of the Native Americans of North America, Mesoamerica, and the places where they may have communicated. So I will see you in the next sections for this part 3 of this Q&A.